No species had ever survived the Crucible's Apex Protocol. Then a human woman walked out of it, asking for coffee. Nobody in the Galactic Council chamber expected the betting pool to hit 40 million credits over a single human. But there we were, watching Broker Vesh's 6 arms frantically update the odds on holographic displays that flickered like dying stars around the amphitheater. Current odds stand at 200 to 1 against survival, Vesh announced, his translator struggling to keep pace with his rapid-fire script dialect. Do I hear any takers for extended survival past the 6-hour mark? Anyone? No, didn't think so. I sat in the observer section, mandibles clicking in what my species considers amusement. The chamber reeked of anticipation, pheromones from a dozen different species mixing into a cocktail of skepticism and greed. To my left, a Voranti diplomat kept adjusting her thermal suit, condensation gathering on the exterior. To my right, 3 Quellan military advisors huddled together, their crystalline heads refracting the light into rainbow patterns as they whispered among themselves. This is barbaric, someone muttered from the upper galleries. A Pelthian, judging by the squeaky undertone. This is justice. High Arbiter Ram corrected, his massive frame unfolding from the central seat. The Voranthi leader commanded attention simply by existing. All 9 feet of him covered in scales that had witnessed 3 centuries of galactic politics. The human colony on Thresh 9 violated the Ecological Preservation Act. 17 native species driven to extinction. Deliberate, calculated, unforgivable. And you think throwing one of them into the Crucible will teach humanity a lesson? The Pelthian squeaked back. Run's laugh sounded like grinding glaciers. I think it will teach them humility. Every species that has faced the Crucible has emerged with a newfound respect for the universe's dangers. Those that emerged at all, anyway. On the main display, the human subject appeared. Kira Vance, according to the data file. 28 standard years old. Former ecological surveyor, which meant she had some field experience. She stood in the preparation chamber, studying the equipment they had provided with an expression I couldn't quite parse. Humans were still relatively new to the galactic stage, their facial expressions a mystery wrapped in flesh-tone enigma. 5 minutes until insertion, Vesh called out. Last chance for bets, people. Remember, the house always wins, but today, nobody wins quite like the house. The odds updated again, 250 to 1. I placed my bet on her lasting 3 hours. Call me optimistic, Kira Vance looked, and I say this with all due respect to her species, utterly unremarkable. Average height for a human, which meant short by galactic standards. Brown hair pulled back in what their species called a ponytail. Skin tone somewhere between pale and tan, which apparently mattered to humans for reasons the rest of us had stopped trying to understand. She wore the standard survival suit they had issued, gray and functional, designed to protect against environmental extremes, but nothing else. Look at her, Thaxon said from his position near the front of the observation deck. The Quellan commander gestured with one of his 4 arms, light scattering through his translucent form. She moves like prey. Cautious. Afraid. This will be over before the second challenge phase activates. Several species murmured agreement. A Voranthi junior officer actually laughed, a sound like rocks tumbling down a mountainside. The display shifted, showing the Crucible in all its glory. Or horror, depending on your perspective and whether you were watching from comfortable seating or about to be dropped into it. The arena sprawled across 50 square kilometers of artificially generated nightmares. Zone 1 started simple enough, a rocky desert where temperatures swung from freezing to boiling every 6 hours. Seemed almost pleasant until you noticed the crystalline formations that exploded when exposed to rapid temperature changes. Zone 2 featured a jungle that grew in real time, plants that could strangle a Quellan warrior in under 30 seconds. Zone 3 was where things got interesting. Acidic lakes, carnivorous fog, and gravitational anomalies that could crush bone into powder or send you floating into the energy barriers that marked the arena's perimeter. She is studying the equipment manifest, one of the observers noted. A Heptar scientist, her skin shifting through colors that indicated deep curiosity. Interesting. Most subjects panic at this stage. I zoomed in on Kira's face using my personal display. She was indeed reviewing the gear they had provided. One multi-tool, designed to handle basic repairs and construction. One filtration unit for water. One thermal regulator, good for about 12 hours of protection before needing a recharge. One emergency beacon that wouldn't work because, well, this was supposed to be a trial, not a rescue operation. Standard kit. Bare minimum. Enough to give hope, but not enough to guarantee anything. She keeps looking at the multi-tool. I observed to nobody in particular, probably wondering why we only gave her one. A nearby Skrit gambler chittered. Humans love their tools. Read the species file. They even make tools to make other tools. Adorable, really. 30 seconds to insertion, Vesh announced. The chamber fell silent except for the ambient hum of life support systems and the nervous chittering of species who had placed substantial bets. Kira Vance took a deep breath, squared her shoulders and faced the insertion portal. The odds updated one final time, 300 to 1, against. She stepped through. The insertion portal spat Kira out into Zone 1 at coordinates that placed her directly in the path of the afternoon heat surge. Within minutes, the temperature climbed from a comfortable 20 degrees to a blistering 65. The ground beneath her feet began radiating heat like a cooking surface. "And here we go," Vesh announced cheerfully. "Watch closely, folks. This is usually when the screaming starts." Except Kira did not scream. She did not panic. She did not run in circles looking for shade that did not exist. Instead, she dropped to one knee, pulled out the multi-tool and started digging. "What is she doing?" Thaxon leaned forward, his crystalline structure humming with confusion. "Digging her own grave, perhaps?" someone suggested. Laughter rippled through the chamber. I watched closely. Kira was not digging randomly. She had found a spot where 3 large rocks created a natural formation, and she was excavating the sand between them, going deeper and deeper. Within 10 minutes she had created a hole roughly a meter deep. Then she did something that made absolutely no sense. She climbed into it and used the multi-tool to wedge the rocks closer together over her head, creating a makeshift shelter. "That accomplishes nothing," Rom stated flatly. "The heat will still reach her. The rocks will only trap it." Except the temperature readouts from her suit told a different story. Inside her little cave, the temperature stabilized at 30 degrees. Hot, certainly. Uncomfortable, absolutely. But survivable. "She is using the rocks as insulation," the Heptar scientist said, her skin flashing bright orange with surprise. "Then the sand below ground level stays cooler. Basic thermodynamics, but applied with remarkable speed." "Lucky guess," Thaxon muttered. The heat surge peaked at 72 degrees, held for 2 hours, then began its descent toward the nightly freeze. This was when most test subjects made their fatal mistake. They would leave their shelter too early, assuming the worst had passed, only to encounter the crystalline formations that became unstable during temperature transitions. Kira stayed in her hole. "Is she sleeping?" A Pelthian observer squeaked in disbelief. The bioradouts confirmed it. Heart rate steady, breathing slow and regular. The human had decided that since she had built adequate shelter, she might as well rest while the environment sorted itself out. "That is, I mean, you cannot just," Thaxon sputtered, all 4 arms gesturing wildly. "The challenge is meant to be challenging." "I believe it still is," I pointed out. "She has simply chosen not to participate in the challenging parts unnecessarily." When the temperature dropped to 0 degrees, Kira emerged from her shelter. She spent exactly 3 minutes observing her surroundings in the dim twilight, then went back into her hole, used the multi-tool to collapse one side of it, and started piling sand and rocks to insulate against the coming cold. "Oh, come on," someone in the upper gallery shouted. "This is cheating." "How is survival cheating in a survival challenge?" I asked, genuinely curious. Nobody had a good answer. By the time the freeze hit its lowest point at -40 degrees, Kira was back in her modified shelter, thermal regulator set to minimum output to conserve power, apparently sleeping again. "Current survival time 6 hours and 12 minutes. Vesh announced, his voice notably less cheerful. "The House would like to remind everyone that all bets are final and non-refundable." In the front row, Thaxon's crystalline head had turned a deep purple color that I was pretty sure indicated extreme frustration. I checked my bet. 3 hours, I had said. I was already wrong. Somehow, I did not mind losing this one. "Activate Zone 2 protocols," Rom commanded, his voice cutting through the murmurs of disbelief that had filled the chamber. "If she wants to sleep through Zone 1, let us see how she handles aggressive flora." Thaxon practically vibrated with approval. "Finally. Zone 2 does not allow for passive survival. The strangler vines alone will end this." The display shifted to show Kira approaching the transition barrier between zones. She had waited out the full temperature cycle, then spent an hour carefully navigating around the crystalline formations during the stable period. Smart. Cautious. Boring to watch, if I was being honest, but effective. She stopped at the barrier, studying the jungle visible on the other side. Even from the observation deck I could see the vegetation moving, writhing, reaching. Zone 2 was a biological nightmare. Plants genetically accelerated to grow at visible rates, programmed with rudimentary predatory instincts. Why did you select her specifically? I asked Thaxon, suddenly curious. Out of all the humans in that colony, why Kira Vance? The Quellan commander's laugh sounded like wind chimes in a storm. Her file indicated ecological expertise. We thought it would be poetic. Let the one who understood ecosystems be consumed by one. Besides, her role in the Thresh 9 violations was significant. She supervised the deforestation of the northern continent. Supervised the deforestation, I repeated. So she knows plants. New plants, Thaxon corrected. Past tense will be appropriate shortly. Kira stepped through the barrier. Immediately, 3 strangler vines shot toward her from different directions, moving with the speed of striking serpents. The observers leaned forward. This was it. This was where the humans' luck ran out. Kira rolled sideways, came up running, then stopped abruptly and reversed direction. The vines, unable to halt their momentum, tangled with each other. She sprinted past them while they thrashed, trying to separate. Luck, Thaxon insisted. Maybe. But then Kira did something that made me reconsider. She climbed a tree. Not just any tree, but specifically one of the ironbark variants, a species with wood so dense that even the strangler vines could not penetrate it. She wedged herself into a fork between branches and went still. She is trapped, Rom observed. The moment she descends, the vines will take her. Except Kira was not planning to descend. She was watching the jungle, and I realized she was studying the patterns. The vines moved in predictable arcs. The carnivorous flowers opened and closed on regular intervals. The whole zone operated on biological rhythms. She pulled out her multi-tool and started stripping bark from a dead branch. Then she began weaving. Actually weaving, like some primitive artisan, creating what looked like a basket or a shield. What is the point of that? A Pelthian observer asked. 20 minutes later we found out. Kira descended from the tree holding her woven bark shield in front of her. When a strangler vine struck, it hit the shield instead of her flesh. The vine's thorns, designed to pierce soft tissue, stuck fast in the dense bark weave. Kira twisted, yanking the vine off balance, then ran while it retracted. She repeated this maneuver 6 times, moving deeper into Zone 2 in short bursts, using the shield to deflect, distract, and occasionally trap the hostile vegetation. Odds now at 120 to 1, Vesh announced, sounding distinctly unhappy about it. She is using primitive tactics, Thaxon protested. Weaving? Seriously? This is a test of survival in the modern age, not a demonstration of ancient crafts. Survival does not care about modernity, the Heptar scientist observed. It cares about effectiveness, and her methods are proving extremely effective. I watched Kira navigate around a patch of acid-spitting flowers by watching their ejection patterns, timing her movements to the gaps. She found a stream, tested the water with her filtration unit, then drank deeply before refilling her containers. 12 hours into the crucible, still alive, still moving, still thinking, I began to suspect we had made a terrible miscalculation. Not about the challenge, about humans. Enough of this, Rom declared, rising from his seat with the finality of a judge pronouncing sentence. Activate the Predator Protocol. All zones. Simultaneous deployment. A collective gasp went through the chamber. Even Vesh stopped updating his odds board. All 6 arms frozen in mid-gesture. High Arbiter, one of the council members, ventured carefully. The Predator Protocol has never been activated before the 18-hour mark. The subject has only been in the crucible for 14 hours. Regulations also state that I have full discretion over challenge parameters. Rom interrupted. This human is making a mockery of a sacred trial. We will see how well her primitive tactics fare against actual threats. I felt my respiratory system constrict. The Predator Protocol was not meant to be survivable. It was meant to be a finale, a last desperate test for subjects who had already proven themselves exceptional. Activating it now was not justice. It was murder with extra steps. You cannot be serious, I said, surprised to hear my own voice. Rom's gaze fixed on me. Do you object, Observer Krell? Perhaps you have grown fond of the human. Developed some sympathy for her species. I have grown fond of fair trials, I shot back. This is an execution. Then she should not have participated in the extinction of 17 species, Rom said flatly. Activate the protocol. The arena transformed. In Zone 1, thermal vents erupted, turning the entire desert into a hellscape of superheated steam and freezing geysers. In Zone 2, the plants went into feeding frenzy mode, vines whipping through the air like thrashing cables, and into Zone 3, where Kira had just entered, they released the Ravagers. I had seen Ravagers in action once before. Bioengineered predators, each one a fusion of the deadliest traits from a dozen different apex species. Fast, intelligent, relentless. 3 of them materialized from the jungle edge, their adaptive camouflage flickering as they locked onto Kira's heat signature. She has no weapons, I said quietly. She has a multi-tool and a woven bark shield. Then she will die quickly. Thaxon replied, but his voice lacked conviction. The Ravagers attacked in coordinated formation, a tactic that had overwhelmed trained Quellan warriors. Kira saw them coming, and for the first time since entering the Crucible, I saw fear flash across her face. Real, genuine terror. Then something happened. Something I would spend the next several cycles trying to explain in my reports. Kira did not freeze. She did not run blindly. Instead, she threw herself backward into the acidic lake she had been carefully avoiding, disappearing beneath the caustic surface. Suicide, someone whispered. Her suit's bio-readouts spiked, warnings flashing red across every monitor. The acid was eating through the outer layer of her survival gear. She had maybe 90 seconds before it reached her skin, maybe 3 minutes before it killed her. The Ravagers circled the lake's edge, confused. Their programming did not account for prey that chose certain death over being caught. 60 seconds. Kira's oxygen levels dropping, the acid compromising her suit's integrity at an alarming rate. 45 seconds. The Ravagers began to lose interest, their attention spans short by design. They started to wander back toward the jungle. 30 seconds. Kira's heart rate was through the roof, every alarm on her suit screaming. The Ravagers disappeared into the undergrowth. 15 seconds. I realized I had stopped breathing. Kira exploded from the water, gasping, her suit smoking and partially dissolved. She scrambled onto the bank, rolled through dirt and vegetation to neutralize the remaining acid, then lay there shaking violently. The chamber had gone absolutely silent. She chose acid over claws, the Heptar scientist said, her skin cycling through colors too rapidly to interpret. She calculated that she could survive the acid long enough for the Ravagers to disengage, but could not survive a direct confrontation. That level of risk assessment under pressure that is impossible, Thaxon finished. That is impossible. No species maintains rational thought when facing certain death. Fear overrides logic. It is biological law. Apparently, I said, watching Kira slowly get to her feet, checking her ruined suit with shaking hands. Human biology did not receive that particular memo. She had burns on her exposed skin where the acid had broken through. Her suit was barely functional. The thermal regulator was completely destroyed. She had no protection against Zone 3's environmental hazards anymore, and she was still alive. Current odds, Vesh said into the silence, his voice barely above a whisper, 20-1. Rom sat back down heavily. For the first time since I had known the High Arbiter, he looked uncertain. What happened next could only be described as a masterclass in what my species would call spite-driven innovation, and what humans apparently called Tuesday. Kira spent 10 minutes treating her acid burns using the filtration unit's internal chemicals, which was not their intended purpose but seemed to work anyway. Then she looked at her dissolved suit, looked at the hostile jungle around her, and made a decision that caused Thaxon to make a noise I can only describe as a mechanical sob. She started scavenging the strangler vines that had tried to kill her in Zone 2. She backtracked, found several dead ones, and stripped their fibrous cores. The iron-bark tree she had sheltered in, she harvested chunks of it using her multi-tool, which was showing serious wear but still functional. The acidic lake that had nearly dissolved her alive. She collected samples in the remains of her water containers. What is she doing? Rom demanded. She cannot be. She is building something. The Heptar scientist said, her entire body now a bright, fascinated yellow. Look at the way she is arranging materials. That is purposeful construction. Over the next 3 hours, while the entire observation chamber watched in growing disbelief, Kira Vance assembled what could only be described as armor. Crude, ugly, lashed together with vine fibers, but unmistakably functional. Iron bark plates covered her torso and thighs. Woven vine fiber protected her arms. She had even created a helmet of sorts from multiple layers of bark. "That will not stop a Ravager," Thaxton stated, but his voice had lost its certainty. "No," I agreed. "But it will stop the carnivorous fog, the thorn bushes, the temperature extremes, and about a dozen other environmental hazards. She is not trying to fight the Ravagers. She is trying to outlast everything else." Then Kira did something that made me laugh out loud, a sound that earned me several shocked stares from nearby observers. She took the acidic water she had collected and started applying it to the iron bark pieces, carefully controlled amounts that etched the surface but did not destroy it. The acid reacted with something in the wood, creating a hard, resinous coating. "She is waterproofing her armor with the same acid that nearly killed her," I announced to the chamber. "She is using the Crucible's own weapons as tools." "This is cheating," someone shouted from the upper galleries. "Again, show me the rule she is breaking," I challenged. "Show me where the regulations say subjects cannot adapt, cannot learn, cannot turn their environment to their advantage." "Silence." Kira stood up, fully armored in her improvised gear, looking like some sort of post-apocalyptic warrior. Then she picked a direction deeper into Zone 3 and started walking with purpose. "Where is she going?" Rom asked. The tracking system showed her heading straight for the gravitational anomaly fields, areas where space-time bubbled and twisted, where one wrong step could crush you flat or send you bouncing like a toy. "She is going to get herself killed," Thaxton said, hope creeping back into his voice. Except Kira stopped at the edge of the first anomaly field and started throwing rocks. Small ones at first, watching how the gravity wells caught and manipulated them, then larger ones. She was mapping the field, using basic physics and observation. Then she stepped into it. My respiratory system seized again. This was it. This was where her luck ran out. Kira moved through the gravity wells like she was dancing, stepping into low-gravity zones to leap over obstacles, using high-gravity zones to change direction rapidly. At one point, a Ravager burst from the undergrowth behind her. She immediately jumped into a high-gravity well that would have crushed most species. The Ravager followed and was instantly flattened into paste. Kira emerged on the other side, gravity well neutralizing most of the impact on her armored form, winded but alive. "Current odds," Vesh whispered, 5-1. "The house is losing money. The house is actually losing money." I looked at my initial bet. 3 hours, I had predicted. We were now at 22 hours. I had never been happier to lose credits in my entire life. "Release the Apex," Rom commanded, his voice hollow. He had gone from righteous authority to desperate gambler, and everyone in the chamber knew it. "High Arbiter, the Apex has never been deployed with a subject still active," a council member protested weakly. "It violates 12 different safety protocols." "There are no safety protocols in the Crucible," Rom snapped. "That is the entire point. Release it." The Apex was not a creature. It was a system. Every hazard, every predator, every environmental nightmare in all 3 zones operating at maximum lethality simultaneously. Temperature extremes, gravity fluctuations, acid fog, strangler vines, and the remaining 2 Ravagers, now actively hunting with enhanced aggression protocols. It was designed to provide a dramatic conclusion to the challenge, a final 30-minute spectacle where subjects either reached the extraction point or died trying. The extraction point sat at the center of Zone 3, marked by a shimmering beacon tower. Kira saw the beacon activate. She was currently 4 kilometers away, standing in a clearing, breathing hard. Her improvised armor was scorched, torn, and barely holding together. Her multi-tool had finally broken, the handle snapped clean off. She had been in the Crucible for 28 hours. "She cannot make it," Thaxton said, but he sounded like he was trying to convince himself. 4 kilometers through the Apex protocol, impossible. Kira looked around at the chaos erupting throughout the zones, looked at her destroyed equipment, looked at the beacon. Then she smiled. Actually smiled. "Oh no," I said. "She has a plan." "There is no plan that works here," Rom insisted. Kira proved him wrong in the most spectacular way possible. She ran directly toward the nearest gravity anomaly, the massive one we had all been assuming she was avoiding. The one that could launch objects with ballistic force if you hit it at the right angle. She would not, the Heptar scientist breathed. She absolutely would. Kira sprinted into the anomaly's edge, angled her body, and let the gravitational forces catch her. She went airborne, launched like a projectile across 2 kilometers of hostile terrain. She sailed over acid pools, over carnivorous fog, over strangler vine nests. The first Ravager leaped to intercept her trajectory. Could not reach her. She was too high. The second Ravager positioned itself at her projected landing point. Except Kira was not landing there. She twisted in mid-air, caught another gravity well's edge, and changed direction entirely. Basic orbital mechanics applied to survival. She came down hard in a low-gravity zone 300 meters from the beacon, rolled through the landing, and started running. Her armor was shedding pieces with each step. The temperature had spiked to dangerous levels. Acid fog rolled in from 3 directions. 200 meters. The observation chamber had erupted into chaos. Species were shouting in a dozen different languages. Vesh's betting board had crashed entirely. Unable to process the sudden flood of changing wagers. 100 meters. Both Ravagers converged on her position. She was not going to make it. The math did not work. They were too fast. 50 meters. Kira ripped off a piece of her burning armor and threw it sideways. The Ravagers, programmed to respond to heat signatures, split their attention for exactly 2 seconds. She crossed the threshold and slammed her hand against the beacon. The crucible went silent. All hazards deactivating simultaneously. The timer read 29 hours 43 minutes, 18 seconds. Kira Vance collapsed to her knees, smoking, bleeding, and absolutely, impossibly alive. Nobody in the chamber spoke. Nobody seemed capable of it. The medical team reached Kira within 90 seconds of the beacon activation, which was apparently 85 seconds longer than she wanted to wait. She waved them off initially, insisting she could walk to the extraction shuttle herself, which was objectively untrue given that she collapsed again after 3 steps. The observation chamber remained frozen in what I can only describe as collective shock. Rom sat motionless in his seat, his massive form hunched forward. Thaxon had gone completely transparent, his crystalline structure vibrating at a frequency that suggested internal crisis. Vesh had abandoned his betting station entirely and was curled in a corner, all 6 arms wrapped around himself. Medical report, Rom finally said, his voice barely audible. The lead physician, a Torvali, with 4 eyes that let her see in multiple spectrums, consulted her data pad. 2nd-degree acid burns covering 18% of her body. Severe dehydration. Muscle strain in both legs. 3 cracked ribs. Mild radiation exposure, hypothermia and heat exhaustion, somehow simultaneously. Malnutrition. And she is asking if we have any coffee. Coffee? Rom repeated. A human stimulant beverage. Apparently she is tired. The physician's tail twitched with something between amusement and disbelief. She will make a full recovery within 2 standard weeks. 3 if she does not rest, which seems likely given her personality profile. The Heptar scientist stood up, her skin now a deep contemplative blue. High Arbiter, I believe we need to discuss the implications of what we have just witnessed. There are no implications, Rom said, but his conviction had evaporated. She survived. That was always a possibility. No species has ever survived the Apex Protocol, I interjected. No species has ever turned the Crucible's hazards into resources. No species has ever weaponized gravity wells for transportation, and certainly no species has ever done it while wearing homemade armor constructed from materials that were actively trying to kill them hours earlier. She got lucky, Thaxon tried. For 30 hours straight, the Heptar scientist challenged. That is not luck, that is adaptation, problem solving, creativity under pressure. We designed the Crucible to break spirits, to humble the arrogant, to teach respect for forces beyond our control. She treated it like a challenging camping trip. A very challenging camping trip, I amended, watching the medical feeds show Kira arguing with the physicians about whether she really needed to stay overnight for observation. She was losing the argument but seemed determined to make her objections known. Rom stood slowly, moving like someone who had aged a century in a single day. What are you suggesting? The Heptar scientist's skin flashed bright red, the color of important declarations. I am suggesting that we severely underestimated humanity. We saw them as reckless, destructive, primitive. We saw the damage on Thresh 9 and assumed incompetence combined with malice. But what if it was not incompetence? What if humans are simply so adaptable, so relentlessly focused on survival and expansion, that they reshape environments without even realizing the consequences? That does not excuse 17 extinct species, Rom countered. No, I agreed. It does not excuse it, but it does explain it. And more importantly, it suggests that punishment and humiliation are not effective teaching tools for humans. You cannot break something that bends in every direction. You cannot humble something that treats near-death experiences as learning opportunities. On the medical feed, Kira had apparently won her argument through sheer persistence. She was sitting up, accepting a thermal blanket and what I assumed was the coffee she had requested, looking exhausted but satisfied. So what do we do? Thaxon asked quietly. We change our approach, the Heptar scientist said. We stop trying to break humans and start trying to channel them. Because a species that can do what we just witnessed, given proper guidance instead of punishment, could either save the galaxy or accidentally destroy it while trying to help. Probably both, I muttered. Simultaneously, while apologizing for the inconvenience, nobody disagreed with me. Nobody could. 3 days after Kira Vance walked out of the Crucible, the Galactic Council held an emergency session. Not about the Thresh 9 violations, not about ecological preservation, about what to do with the human who had turned their ultimate trial into a highlight reel of creative survival. I attended as an observer, which was ironic considering observation was literally my job title and I had spent the previous 72 hours filing reports that essentially boiled down to everything we thought we knew was wrong. The human colonies are calling her a hero, a Pelthian diplomat squeaked, waving a datapad showing human news feeds. They have made songs about her. Songs? There are children dressing up as her for some sort of costume event. She has become a symbol of human resilience. We made her a symbol, I corrected. We broadcast the entire challenge on public channels. We wanted to humiliate humanity. Instead, we gave them a legend. Ron looked like he had not recharged his thermal systems in days. The original charges still stand. The ecological damage still occurred. Yes, the Heptar scientist agreed. But now if we prosecute her, we look vindictive. If we pardon her, we look weak. We have created what humans call a no-win scenario, rather fitting considering what we put her through. Axon, who had regained his usual crystalline purple hue, leaned forward. There is another problem. 17 other species have formally requested to attempt the Crucible. They want to prove they can match the humans' performance. Absolutely not, Rom declared. Additionally, Thaxon continued, his tone suggesting he was enjoying this, we have received 43,000 applications from humans volunteering for the next Crucible challenge. Apparently, they see it as, and I quote, a really extreme adventure sport. I could not help it. I laughed. A full, genuine laugh that echoed through the council chamber. This is not funny, Observer Krell, Rom said sharply. High Arbiter. With all due respect, it is hilarious. We tried to teach humanity a lesson about humility and restraint. Instead, we taught them that our worst punishment is something they consider entertaining. We have not humbled them. We have given them a new challenge to conquer, and humans love challenges the way script love profit margins. On my personal display, I pulled up the latest update on Kira Vance. She had been hired as a consultant for the Galactic Ecological Restoration Project, tasked with helping repair the damage on Thresh 9. Apparently, someone had decided that her survival skills and adaptability might be useful for working in hostile environments. She was already submitting proposals, aggressive, ambitious proposals that made the Torvali environmental scientists nervous. So, Vesh chittered from his corner, apparently recovered from his financial losses. Anyone want to bet on whether humanity becomes our greatest ally or our biggest problem? I checked my credit balance. Still recovering from my last wager. Both, I said confidently. Definitely both. At the same time, while apologizing and offering to help fix whatever they accidentally broke, the sad part was, I was not even joking.